So, second front is on air for the second time during this month of February, and at the brink of the full-scale Russian invasion that marked the hottest stage of a total war, global war that is raging on the European continent, and Europeans are finally kind of looks like they're starting to realize what is happening, but we'll talk about it tonight. Here is Marek Suprun and Stefan Bandera, and my name is Oleksii Bobrovnykov. I'm a correspondent that just returned from Brussels, from this NATO gathering of defense ministers and the Ramstein gathering. So basically, I don't know if I'm in a position to be a moderator, or I'll just try to give some perspective as a witness to some of those meetings and trying to overhear some of the conversations over there, which was quite interesting. And well, you know, we'll give it a shot, and all three of us, and including Maxim Yakovlyev, who's going to join us in a while, who's an expert in international politics, works in Kiev. And the second front, from Winnipeg to London, Kiev, Brussels. Marco is in Kiev now, but it's a bridge between England and Ukraine, while Stefko is in Winnipeg. And a few hours ago, I just returned from the capital of European bureaucracy and NATO. So let's dance, yeah? Shall we dance?
So, Oleksii, you just got back, Oleksii, from Brussels. What was the acceptance? Were all Ukrainians greeted as heroes, as kind of walking superheroes? If you were Ukrainian, you were like treated specially this time around?
That's a good one. I mean, let's start with checking our mics. Symbolically, we do it with Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Героям слава.
Good. Yeah, Steph goes online, and Marco's online. Just wanted to check Marco's mic, but it's working. That's a good one. I'll start from my attempts to get closer to the speakers, insiders, experts, basically those who take part in this meeting. And we know that this year Ramstein meeting and defense minister session were happening simultaneously. They were happening in the same days. But of course I knew about them because I had to go through this whole process of accreditation and the clearance from Ukrainian officials to get out of the country in the period where everyone is awaiting for some, well, we see the beefing up of Russian forces. We expect some stronger offensive on the Eastern Front, so it's pretty tough, and to get out of the country was an issue. But yeah, I got a chance to do it for 3-4 days. So I was getting ready for this meeting, of course, and I was trying to contact, at my humble opinion, the most interesting delegations of local diplomats and military experts, starting from, of course, Northern America, in particularly USA and Pentagon, which, you know, everyone wants to talk to them, and it was tough. Although there were a couple of, I would say, there were a couple of funny moments during the session, but we'll talk about them later. But not surprisingly, I think I also I tried to contact the Hungarian diplomatic mission to NATO. For all of us, Hungary, being what it is, being our neighbor and being a part of NATO, and being the one that is strongly speculating on this absolutely mad idea that Ukraine is sort of not allowing originally those Ukrainians with Hungarian ethnicity. And to be honest with you, many of them are holders of Hungarian passport, which is in double citizenship. Dual citizenship is not allowed in Ukraine. So to be quite honest, those hundreds of thousands of people are risking their Ukrainian citizenship by the mere fact they basically hold Hungarian passes. But this is another thing, and Ukraine turns a blind eye on that. as well as on many other things when it comes to this gray zone of politics and this gray zone of citizenships, which is again another issue. But Hungary is, and this is an open secret, everybody knows that Hungary is opposing many packages of aid to Ukraine when it comes to some serious military gear. However, they are backing anti-Russian sanctions quite often, which is good news. So I talked to a few ambassadors to NATO from our from countries that are friendly to Ukraine and Hungarians. They call them, I would say, more a gray zone than a part of the axis, than a part of Putin's politics directly. However, it's a speculation, but I wanted Hungarians to do a hard talk, to do a real hard talk with a couple of their senior diplomats, to look them in the eye and ask a few very blatant questions on, well, you seriously see the human right abuse? What were the cases where anybody was persecuted for speaking the native language of the grandmothers and fathers? And where do you feel that Ukraine is stepping over the red line that is at least slightly comparable to what a totalitarian force is doing? Because when you are speaking of human right abuse and the language right abuse, you are putting Ukraine on the same table with Russia, which is nonsense, because we were never a part of a policies that would resemble the policy of the empire. So I persistently try to contact Hungarians, and they simply ignored my request. So when I will do some story, I just finished a story for Kyiv Post on the results of this meeting, and I think it's pretty good, and we'll discuss that later. But I still hold in my pocket a couple of interesting ideas of what to write based on the information and intelligence that I think I was able to gather in Brussels. And I am now in a position to write anything I want about Hungary, because I've already have this, this journalistic excuse, which is terrible and beautiful both ways. When you write something, you of course have to contact the part that you are writing about, the subject that you're writing about. And in this case, I have a full right to say that I was trying to contact Hungarian diplomats in their mission, but they never responded to my request. So, Hungary was somewhere behind the lines. It was not seen, but we still feel that there is some opposition on behalf of Mr. Orban's regime, Mr. Orban's government. Sorry for the slip of the tongue. Never meant it. Okay. And of course, for the rest, it was the Baltic states. Like, we started with this, with Lithuanians singing "Shenov Merlo Ukraina," but I actually forgot that this time we should have probably put Estonian version also, because we'll talk a bit on Estonians, and I had a chance to interview their defense minister, Hanno Pevkur, an absolutely fantastic figure in the Baltics. But there was this persistent and absolute desire from all of the members of their delegations and the military to talk, to share, to encourage, to tap your shoulder, but not in a sympathetic way, but in a way brothers do that are brothers on the front line, brothers in arms do. And this was very, very, very touching, but still, by many Ukrainians were greeted, I would say, as some exotic creature that has just arrived from some exotic forest, from somewhere nobody knows where, from some nowhere land, and it was still there, but on this very basic level in the tribe. I think I can use this word here when I say tribe, which is of course an unacceptable word for politics, but I only mean journalists and cameramen and this kind of tribe, and I think I can allow this metaphor. Americans were persistently looking for Ukrainian media corps to let them ask a question, to let their voice be heard. And that was funny and beautiful in a way, because I got twice assistance to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin approached me, asking me whether, of course I wrote a few letters to them asking for some exclusive interview, which is very helpful for journalists of the written media, for outlets like a newspaper, because you are working in very different circumstances than the broadcasters, and the audience is very different. So I persistently asked them for a comment and an exclusive comment, but they approached me and said, like, we will give you a chance to ask Lloyd Austin a question, and I was the one who turned Lloyd Austin down. I said, I'm very sorry. I was looking forward for it, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, but at this time I have to meet the defense minister of Latvia, and we have an exclusive interview with Madam Minister. So unfortunately, I have to say that probably we'll do it next time.
Wow. Well, I guess Lloyd Austin is doing such a great job that maybe there's no real questions to him.
Yeah, the jets.
Yeah,
Everyone was looking for the jets. Marcus want to say something. Sorry, I've been talking a lot, but I'm just back from a train, and I was not talkative for 16 hours on a train writing an article. So I don't want to block anyone from stepping in. Marco, that's your turn.
Well, no, that's good. It's the Hungary thing is an interesting angle because just today Anders Osland tweeted that the EU couldn't issue their sanction against Rosatom because of the Hungarian veto. And he says that Viktor Orban works with Rosatom in a dubious way. And I think that was worthy of an investigation on your part, our part, as to what exactly, I have an idea, I could guess about what that cooperation might look like. But Rosatom is effectively controlled by, again, Anders Osland is saying, Mikhail Kovalchuk, and who's the brother of Yuri Kovalchuk, who he calls Putin's consigliere. And I think there might be something in there, especially regarding the cooperation that you uncovered in your book between Bulgaria and the network of TV executives that were supporting the annexation and the puppet regime. The atomic energy has always been a target of the Kremlin because they hold the key. For the longest time, they were the sole supplier of the nuclear fuel for many of the Soviet-styled reactors. And Ukraine was the first country that actually showed those countries that do have Soviet-style reactors that you can use non-Russian provided nuclear fuel sources, like from Westinghouse. And Westinghouse was one of the first targets of Russia's full-scale invasion last year, especially when they occupied the Zaporizhia nuclear power station. So that the Hungarians wouldn't want to talk to you is not surprising, but I think it's definitely an issue that requires our attention because the Hungarians are going to continue to play spoiler or a puppet regime of what representing the interests per se of the Kremlin.
Totally, Roger, that. And I got a hint, I got a tip from one of my sources back in Ukraine, being in Brussels, on this Rosatom thing. And I was trying to check it out with the missions, with the diplomatic missions back in Brussels. That's we're on that track for sure. And maybe we'll do some story together. Maybe we'll see how it goes. But the news are breaking already, and it's clearly one of those issues that we will have to address during next weeks and during next conversations on air. And I basically in our daily work, because there's also a situation where we got a couple of Putin cronies that are allegedly about to slip from the news of European sanctions in the next few days, and I'm trying to check that information. I wouldn't share it publicly as yet because I gotta verify it. I gotta verify the news from my source, but we'll get closer to that. But this is a very, I would say, tactical thing. Because after we got the seizure of Malofeyev's assets in New York, we are hot about, looking for other Putin cronies to get into this news. And as Marco just mentioned, and I'm absolutely happy, Marco, that you got as far in my Gray Zone book that is to be published in the next few months, that you're already on this Bulgarian Greek Malofeyev connection. Which again, it shows us the global scale of this hybrid warfare. But what I was trying to say is that apart from the news that are already, I would say, on the market, there are plenty of questions we were trying to address back there, we as journalists and the diplomatic corps, of course, too. And I've asked Estonian Hanno Pevkur, the defense minister, and I've asked a Latvian defense minister, and I've asked a few people within the diplomatic corps in NATO on the supply chains for software, for a raw materials like titanium, absolutely essential for Russian military production. And there are plenty of loopholes where aggressor is using the Western-produced software to keep on working on producing shells and different other munitions and military gear. And we gotta take a close look at that. And this is definitely a thing that we have to address and have to inquire into.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned your book Gray Zone, and I had a question about whether or not you might have spoken to the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, before his speech in Munich today, because the words "gray zone" were in his speech, in the reference to exactly what you've written about. And in his speech, he also, you talk about Putin cronies, but in his speech, he talks about Putin, but he talks about the Putins in the world and the Putins
in plural
throughout the world in plural. And he talks about a lot. So, yeah, Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, had a speech today during a panel at the Munich conference. It was a panel entitled David on the Dnipro, a reference to the David and Goliath biblical story. And he was on a panel that included Olaf Scholz and Emmanuel Macron, the presidents or the chancellor and president of Germany and France, respectively. Zelensky had what, in my opinion, was a pretty good speech. Excellent, in fact. It's about 13 minutes long. Perhaps we could cue it up and watch it together.
Let's do that. I think I saw it too. It was a really good
Maxim's
speech.
going to join us in a while, but he'll join us basically listening this Zelensky speech, and then we'll move on the conversation together with our guest. So let's just do it. Let's roll. So Zelensky speech, I would ask our broadcast producer to put it on air, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I agree to all of you and would like to remedy one injustice right away. This panel discussion is called David on the Dnipro. I consider it as a rightful respect to Ukraine and to everything our people are doing. But this year, determination was shown on different banks, and not only of the Dnipro, Spree, and Seine, Thames, and Potomac, Vistula, and Tiber. David is now all of us. He is a whole free world. David is everyone who left that there is no alternative but to defeat Goliath, who came to destroy our life. Being David is fighting, and we are fighting. Being David is having a sling to win. We do not have yet the David's sling from Israel, but I believe it is just temporarily. Now I would like to thank for the powerful support and mighty weapons. I thank Olaf and Emmanuel who are present here on this panel, and I thank all our partners present here in Munich, the United States, Britain, all the countries of the EU, and all from the whole world. I'm grateful to everyone who gives the sling to Ukrainian David, thanks to which Russian Goliath has already started to lose his ground. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. We saw it last year, and he will definitely fall already this year. We can make it, all of us together, just as David did. We can make sure that there is no alternative to our victory, but then there should be no alternative to our determination, to the determination of all of us on Dnipro and on Spree, on Seine, on Thames, on Potomac and Vistula, on Tiber, Danube and Jordan, and everywhere, in every part of the world where freedom is valued more than the mercy of a tyrant. Last year, when I was here in Munich at the conference, I was looking for such common determination. Ukraine was clearly telling the world, we will fight for ourselves if Russia starts a full-scale war. I wanted to hear from the world, Ukraine, we will be with you. Unfortunately, I heard it only after Russian missiles struck our land, already after the Russian tanks started moving, already after Putin destroyed all alternatives, leaving just one who will win, he or us. In fact, you have already responded with the name of this conference's panel discussion. Goliath has no chances. But unfortunately, he has a potential. Unfortunately, he tries to buy additional time for his aggression, trading with the world. Unfortunately, he can still destroy many lives, many. That is why we need to hurry up. We need the speed of our agreements, speed of our delivery to strengthen our sling, speed of decisions to limit Russian potential. There is no alternative to speed, because it is the speed that the life depends on. Delay has always been and still is a mistake. While we negotiate how to strengthen our defense with modern tanks, the Kremlin is thinking about ways to strangle Moldova. While we are trying to convince that Ukraine needs modern combat aircraft, the Kremlin has already convinced the Iranian regime. The result is not only lethal Iranian drones in Ukrainian skies, but also something with which the Kremlin paid for it. Are you sure it's just money? Or maybe the world will face the enriched Iranian regime? And to what extent? 90%, 92% or 100%? And I'm sure none of us wants to let the region of Middle East and the Gulf to taste it, while we spent weeks to agree on new sanctions against Russia. The terrorist state is looking for ways to adapt to the restrictions already in place. Through parallel imports, shadow fleet of tankers and the like. Where shall we see the impact of this illegal profit of Russia? In the efforts to corrupt your political systems and international institutions, in attempts to destabilize your social life, and in disinformation campaigns against your people, in escalation in those regions that are sensitive to you. What awaits, for example, Libya, Mali, or Central African Republic while Moscow had the power? What awaits Syria? Nothing good, just like many other nations. So you will have no rest as well. So it's not just about Ukraine. The point is that Goliath must lose. And there is no alternative to this, because the Kremlin can break the security and peace of all who are now represented here in Munich. Delayed decisions of the world are a resource Putin's dictatorship lives on. It's been that way for years. The longer the talks about the enlargement of the European Union dragged on, the more destructiveness the Kremlin brought to the then gray zone between the European Union and Russia. The louder it was said that it was necessary to wait before Ukraine was allowed to enter NATO's open door, the more aggressive Russian policy became. The longer the silence on Crimea, on the global agenda lasted, the more vigorous Russian revanchism became. And the more the world argued over what sanctions and when to impose against Russia, the more shameless the Kremlin's ambitions became. The longer we in Ukraine, in Europe, in the world had no unity, the more illusions Russia had. Now all this is being corrected. Just like last year, I now propose to act immediately. But unlike last year, now I have the most convincing argument, our achievements. Can we detour Russian strikes? Yes. Can we protect our cities from Russian missiles? Definitely. Can we liberate our land? There are 1,891 proofs of this. That is exactly how many cities, towns, villages we managed to liberate from the Russian occupation. Can we restore security in the Black Sea region and food security in the world? The Black Sea Grain Initiative and the humanitarian initiative Grain from Ukraine are convincing. Is it time for Ukraine to be a full-fledged part of the European Union? Most Europeans support membership for Ukraine. We have already gained the status of a candidate country. We are already preparing to start membership negotiations. We are already united with the European economy, logistics, and energy. There is no alternative to Ukrainian victory. There is no alternative to Ukraine in the EU. There is no alternative to Ukraine in NATO. There is no alternative to our unity. Hence, there is no and should not be any alternative to completely get rid of Russian aggression, to liberate the land, to liberate people, because every city, town and village that remains under occupation means people staying in captivity. May people be the subject of compromise? No. We have to liberate Ukraine and Europe, because when the Russian weapon shoot at us, it is already pointed at our neighbors. May Europe be the subject of compromise? No. We have to liberate from Russia's aggressive potential every international institution and every sphere of the world economy, because only then there will be a chance for freedom to pass through our border further to the east. May freedom be the subject of compromise? No. And it's a rock solid no. I'm confident that we can gain victory not only over Putin, but also over Putins. Not only over Putins in Russia, but all around the world. Wouldn't this be a proof of the power of the idea of freedom? It will definitely be. Ladies and gentlemen, determination is never abstract. David defeated Goliath not by the power of conversation, but by the power of these actions, by the courage and sling. Courage is what we have. There is enough of it, not only in Ukraine, but in our entire coalition of victory. The sling should get stronger right now, so that the next year we would gather here in Munich for the first security post-war conference under the condition of free Ukraine, free Europe, free world. Olaf, Emmanuel, all our friends and I, Olaf, Emmanuel, yeah, all our friends, I think you've got me right. I thank you very much for your attention. You, Davids of the free world, we united Davids shall prevail over Putins scattered all over the world. Glory to everyone who is now on the battlefield. Slava Ukraini!
That's an absolutely amazing metaphor. And Maxim Yakovlyev is with us, an expert in international relations and policies. Happy to have you, Max. I just want to make one remark, because for me, the Zelensky speech was very personal in a way, because when I went back to Ukraine exactly a year ago on 3rd of March 2022, I came with a small Georgian regiment, and the closest friend of mine his name is David, he was killed in action 2 weeks later. And when Zelensky was talking about the sling, I have this rope that holds my eyeglasses on my head, which is a sling in a way too. And this thing was given to me by David Ratiani, the Georgian volunteer who was killed 2 days after he gave me this thing, saying that it might be helpful. And as a short-eyed, I have problems with my sight, and so it was a vital necessity to have this sling to hold my glasses, and it helped me out of the fire when we had to basically survive the Russian mortar fire. For me personally, this was very impressive on a very, very personal level and very symbolic. But it's just a remark, and Maxim has a very limited time with us, and we're happy that you are here. I have a question straight away, and then, of course, my colleagues and my friends on this broadcast would also step in. We were listening to Zelensky on purpose because we have this week of, I would say, very posh international gatherings, starting from Ramstein to defense minister sessions. Now there's Munich conference, and there was a lot of things to be discussed, but things that Stepan Bandera noticed, and I appreciate them truly because, in my view, they are vital to understand this war and the strategy and the tactic against the aggressive Russian regime. Zelensky was mentioning trading with the world, Russian trading with the world. He was mentioning parallel imports. He was mentioning the gray zone of Ukraine, but in this time probably more politically than economically, because we are now less a gray zone than we were 2 years ago and a year and a half ago. But and of course he was mentioning informational warfare, the propaganda warfare, the hybrid warfare. But this thing, and because we started this talk with Marek Suprun and with Stefan Bandera, we started it talking about sanctions, Rosatom, which Suprun mentioned, and imports to Russia, Russia importing titanium and other raw materials crucial for their military production. So question to Max would be, how do you see the change, the shift in policies towards blocking Russian military production by the means of cutting them from supplies of direct and indirect components to their military machine? How do you look at this, I would say, market that in a world's open economy, world's global economy, it's extremely hard to address those issues, but yet it is crucial for our defense and for the world's defense and for the world's security. So, Max Yakovlyev, now this is your turn. I'd kindly ask you to give us your perspective.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for having me and for inviting me. I spent the last 15 minutes listening to Zelensky's speech and also to your comment and to your question. I have to admit that I'm not an expert on military supplies, of course, but from what I've heard and the idea of blocking Russian economy and military supplies, I think there is one thing that we in Ukraine really do exaggerate is like, I remember well because I stayed the whole time in Kiev after the full-scale invasion. I just relocated from the central part of Kiev where I'm living now, but to the famous left bank Tryeshina. I do remember well these first weeks when there was some kind of feeling that the Russian economy will either collapse today or tomorrow. It will happen immediately. Russia will never recover, and that is going to happen very fast. And I think because of many other who commented also for Ukrainian media and who really contributed a lot to having this over expectations. I mean, to expect too much that Russia will crumble and Russia will not be able to produce anything the very next day was very wrong. I think that we have to warn our colleagues abroad and think our partners, and this is what I believe Zelensky did, is that Russia is keen on fighting parallel imports. Russia is keen in avoiding sanctions. Russia is keen in collaborating with another horrible regimes like North Korea or Iran today, and finding ways to get the supplies it needs. Of course, we have to pressure Russia, and this is, I always say, this is the decision of Russia, not that this is a decision of our own to be under sanctions, because Russia is punished for what it's doing to Ukraine for violating the world order. But I just would like to discourage all our listeners from believing that the very next day Russia will collapse economically and they will get no supplies. We have to be ready for fighting, taking back our territories. We have to be ready for pushing our foreign partners, for providing us with tanks, with fighter jets and things like that. And we don't have to it's much better to have our expectations, to have the supplies of our Western colleagues and the Russian crumbling economy exceed our expectations than to have it otherwise. that we expect too much, that we have wrong fantasies, and it means that we get more relaxed, and then we get more dissatisfied. And this is the first step to any sort of frustration. We get frustrated if we don't get what we want the very next day. We don't have to be foolish and childish. So this is my main idea. We have to explain, and this is what exactly the 10th package of European Union, the sanction package. The most, if not the most of it, but the big part of it is like punishing those companies who are helping Russia in avoiding sanctions, and also punishing those who do the parallel import into Russia. It's very important to find them and to punish them so that Russia will not get the supplies. So I think from our Ukrainian perspective, the correct message would be Russia is keen on fooling you. Russia is keen on finding ways to get the supplies. What we all need is to really pressure Russia. Russia needs to be excluded from any international plots that it may have its hands in, because it uses its own interests, which means destroying the world order, killing Ukrainians, and expanding its empire. And this is wrong.
Brilliant. Absolutely
I have
brilliant.
one question really quickly, and then Stefko and Marco are free to step in. Well, firstly, yeah, thank you for spending 15 minutes listening to Zelensky. I appreciate it. Second one, as an expert in international politics, would you see, Max, a diplomatic solution, a diplomatic, I would say, a leverage to stop Russian counterparts who are taking part in this gray zone, helping Russia to get those loopholes to import the most needed goods? So, is there a diplomatic way to stress and to strike on their partners in the world that would be really effective and block this parallel economy that is Russia's building?
Thank you very much for asking this brilliant question. This is honestly now, because once I hear diplomatic solution to any question, I would always tell people that there is kind of, a popular misbelief that diplomatic solution is something that people sit like well-dressed people in their suits. They sit by the round tables. They, exchange polite phrases in received pronunciation of the British standard, saying like, "Would you mind ending this war?" And say, "Of course, I beg your pardon for invading Ukraine, and we withdraw our troops immediately." "Oh, thank you very much. Would you like to compensate for damages you inflicted on Ukraine?" "Oh, yes, of course. We'll do it right away, please." Go, and then they continue, to drinking tea with their fingers like that. That will never happen. This is something that's very, very wrong. And a diplomatic solution is a misperception, especially person like by Jürgen Habermas and maybe many others, German intellectuals whom I do not follow, who say that please do not pump arms into Ukraine, do not support Ukraine military, because there might be a diplomatic solution. And what is meant, and this is one of the way to misuse the concept of diplomatic solution, is putting people by the table so that they discuss, apologize, find something in between kind of solution, to appease Putin so that he would be satisfied and the war will end the next day. And this is very wrong. So by diplomatic solution, this is something that Russia is pressuring. This is exactly why Russia wants a sort of negotiation agenda, because it's not about real negotiations, it's about Russians finding time and resources to what you asked me before, to actually to have enough arms to kill us Ukrainians and to destroy Ukraine. Another point with diplomatic solution, it will definitely come after Russia's surrender. And at the point we win this war, and we will have to, once we are so far as to sign a peace treaty with Russia, after we retook our lands and all these have happened, then we can have diplomacy by means of diplomacy. Now, by diplomacy, I mean we will have negotiations on how Russia will pay us back, how Russia will return, for example, the news from this week, Ukrainian children who are taken hostages by Russia to different camps, kind of filtration camps, where they're brainwashed to fall in love with Putin's Russia. And this is disgrace. This is a true war crime. So this is the point where the diplomacy comes, discussing how Russia will repay, how Russia will return and compensate for the damage. And that is diplomacy. It's not about Russian. The third point I would like to see, yes, diplomacy is another thing, is that people, especially our partners like the United Kingdom and the United States of America, they're very good at showing Russia what the diplomats can do in different contexts, showing showing how they are dissatisfied with what Russia does. And on the other hand, there are other countries who are kind of undecided, like India, China. China is a separate point, but who really use this diplomatic language to play this game like if nothing happened, like if something going on in Europe, far away from where we live. And this is a different point. But to sum up my 3 points, first, I think Russia misuses this concept of diplomatic solution. And this is a joke. It cannot happen. This is not feasible. It is not a solution. Secondly, we will have true diplomacy in place once we negotiate all these things I've mentioned, really, how Russia will repair the damage, things like that. And thirdly, the diplomatic things is like once we hear the Red Cross and their position, this international community, once we hear some international organization that urge for both parties to find a solution, this is a very wrong diplomacy. It's not about actually helping Ukraine. I've heard this very interesting comparison, which may be a bit rude, so please, I beg your pardon for that. But actually, like if a guy here on the street rapes a lady, and there is somebody, and the lady she resists, she really fights back, and there is somebody comes and says, you both have to stop. You see? And this is a disgrace to call this action a diplomacy. It is not a diplomacy.
It's a great comment because, after Zelenskiy's speech, there was an interview that Christiana Manpour did with Olaf Scholz, and she actually makes a comment that it takes two to tango, referring to Zelensky, i.e. equating some sort of actions between Ukraine and Russia. And that's part of that victim-blaming mentality that you see in some of those Western journalists that, well, Ukraine did something wrong. In other words, in equating certain actions, it's this sort of sense of moral equivalency. And there really isn't a moral equivalency here. And it's a very, very deep-seated Russophilic outlook that because Ukraine followed its own path and is building its own separate society, that somehow is the issue that is offensive to Russia and therefore to people, not every institution, but it's offensive to some in the West, because they conflate Ukraine and Russia. And when she said that, I thought, that's the problem. If you're going to say it takes two to tango, then why doesn't that construct apply to exactly the metaphor that you use, is that when a woman fights back against being raped, she is somehow the one that caused the rape. And it's a high time for people like Christiana Manpour and probably several others to take that into account, because what they're doing, it relates back to colonialism, that somehow that the in an abusive relationship, that the person who's being abused is somehow wrong, or that they've done something to invoke the rage of the abuser. All of these things are what I find to be really offensive, being here in Ukraine and growing up with in the Ukrainian community in Canada and the United States. Regarding Zelensky's speech, I'll say this. I think that his speech was brilliant.
I'm not interrupting you, just popping up with a remark. I just got a deja vu listening to you and thinking of this. I got a deja vu of a life that I never lived through, which is it feels like you live in times of Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. It's a 12 Angry Men story, happening on a geopolitical level. This is something very close to that. And this was just a remark. I'm sorry, my friends, so keep on rolling.
Regarding the speech, I think it was brilliant for one really, really important message. For almost 12 months now, the Western world, the audiences in the West have heard that Ukraine is asking, or Ukraine is looking for handouts. It's often been used as a weapon by certain members, granted a minority member within the American Congress of the GOP, that they're not going to fund this war forever. But in saying that using the geographical metaphor with all the rivers, I think that was a brilliant comment, because what he does at the end is that he makes everyone there own the victory. And that's really important in building a coalition. And if you notice, he even used the word coalition of victory. That's a really important concept, and it's really important for people. And maybe we've crossed that Rubicon where people like Schulz, Macron, certainly we've crossed it with the UK in their support for Ukraine. I think we're getting close to crossing it in the United States. He makes them co-owners of Ukrainian victory. And another thing, I think he throws down the gauntlet, the warning that the Putins, the plural, are out to corrupt your institutions and social life with disinformation campaigns. We've been on the tip of the spear of fighting disinformation. School of Journalism at Kiev Mohil Academy, where Maxim teaches, it started one of the first, I would say, comprehensive approaches to combating Russian disinformation. And we see it all the time. I mean, we see the amount of Russian disinformation in the Ukrainian ecosystem, information ecosystem. And I think, and I really am being a bit more optimistic today about things, that the Western media outlets are also going to take note. I don't have much data to support my optimism, but I do think that we're on the right track. So great analysis, Maxim. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I can
5
provide
more minutes
just a
with
brief
Maxim.
comment.
So, yeah.
Yes, I'm awfully sorry, colleagues, because then I have a call, or I also have a planned call. So I would have just to briefly comment. It is also my pleasure to teach for the Department of Journalism, but now I'm supervising two PhD theses actually with that department, and both of them deal with how you misuse information. One of the PhD theses is an interesting topic: how the so-called fake republics in DNR, LNR used media to construct their fake statehood. It is an exciting topic. How they really use and how they also manipulated the Western audiences into believing there might be some sort of people's republic there. It is very interesting how they use media to manipulate, because they know the rules of the game of the Western civilized world, and they misuse them for their own good. So this is one thing. Second thing, I think, was who will be entitled to have a share in our victory. To put it the other way around, if you remember before the invasion, especially in December and November of 2000, now what is it like? 2020 now, that one would be, when we had so many world leaders coming to Kiev to visit us. There were some journalists, especially those who were pro-Russian journalists. Now we have almost none of them, or at least they are hesitant to utter the voice, which I find very good. So they said, why are they all coming to us? They are not here to help Ukraine. They are here for their own internal political benefits. Well, my response is, why would I care? People definitely use visits to Ukraine to appeal to their voters, to show that they're doing something. This is the Western civilized democracy and politics as it is. Right. Pure. It is in Russia, where Putin goes somewhere, to die for Amphora or something. It's insanity. But this is exactly what they have. What they have right to. They're helping Ukraine, but they also have to communicate with their voters and stuff like that. Unlike, I think there's an exception to that, and this is a good exception because we cannot equal that all, is the president of Georgia, who decided to tell us that the peace treaty with Ukraine will have to include the withdrawal of Russian troops from Abkhazia and Ossetia. I think you've heard this, because she commented it, and I think this is a wrong time. Secondly, I think if every single country that was ever occupied by Russia, or which is now occupied by Russia, will come up with such suggestions, then we Ukrainians are entitled to ask, excuse me, what was your contribution exactly? And this is correct, that we are actually fighting back Russia. The same, before, even after the invasion, right after way, these jokes that Ukraine should cross the border to Russia and liberate Belgorod People's Republic. So we should liberate them. And so I do trust this information. I saw these jokes from people from Belgorod who said, maybe Ukrainian Nazis are better than the corrupt Putin's people. And this is what the good indicator for me to say, excuse me, you will have to liberate yourselves. And maybe in 50 or 100 years, if you would love to join Ukraine, once you get rid of Putin. So this is something. It's not that we Ukrainians have to change the whole world for good. Of course, we will have to change Russia, because Russia is a threat not only to Ukraine. And those countries who help us, definitely they are entitled to have this kind of share in our victory. But for those who expect us Ukrainians to liberate them, to bring peace with Russia to them, whereas when in reality they contribute nothing to our victory. This is a different story. Maybe for our next discussion, how countries contribute and what will happen to Ukraine, to Russia after we win this war, and that will definitely happen.
I mean, great
Brilliant.
comment, Maxim, and thanks a lot for joining us. That was a pleasure, and that was
Likewise,
that was absolutely fantastic. We'll get back to these conversations hopefully next time. We're doing this Friday English language podcast since last week, and hopefully it's gonna be now it's the name of the game for UMN, for Ukrainian Media Network too. Thank you, Maxim. That was Maxim Yakovlyev was with us. He teaches international politics in the University of Kyiv, and he's an expert in the field of, as we already know, in the field of hybrid war, because Putin's strategies in occupied Luhansk and Donetsk regions are his topic of his PhD, and I would be very, very hot about reading it, because I was peeping into this subject as well. But I just gotta do one thing that is not a routine, but is actually a great pleasure to me, because since we are a market-based media, we're not live on state funding, we don't live on grants from bigger whales like NAD or other places of that kind. I gotta say that we do place ads here at UMN, and one of our partners is a beautiful company that is doing tourism in Iceland, to black sand beaches, ice caves, lava fields, glaciers, northern lights, and that's just a part of the tour. And we got contacts here, and we got the description in the bio too. So we got an English speaking and a Ukrainian speaking guide to lead you to all this absolutely beautiful land of glaciers and lavas and music and Björk's music. So that's one thing that I had to say. And again, UMN, Ukrainian Media Network, is a project that survives on ads and on donations. And I want to show you the couple of QR codes here. That's the way to support the project. We are a project that was created initially by a group of absolutely outstanding Ukrainian broadcasters and writers, which is Roman Skripin and Danil Yanevsky. It started a few years ago. It was growing up. It survived the first the first war, the first wave of Russian aggression, and it survived the second wave of Russian aggression. And I'm pretty positive it's going to live until victory and beyond that. There's also a way to donate to us through Patreon, and I would kindly ask Vlad, our broadcasting director, so to say, to give us this little video that helps our viewers to understand how to donate to us through Patreon. Ролик. Yeah, Yakovlyev was a discovery to me, and that's very good that we had him, and it's a very valuable asset because looking into this Lugansk and Donetsk enclaves that were trying to present themselves to the world as the separate entities is indeed a one of the strategies Kremlin was using in Abkhazia, in Southern Ossetia,
Absolutely.
elsewhere.
I had to, for a while, monitor DNR TV back when they started. And, I really I feel for people like Julia Davis who monitor Russian disinformation so that we don't have to, because just the few times that I had to spend watching DNR TV, it was really bizarre. It was all about kids and Velika Vysotnyana, the Great Patriotic War. It was this just bizarre cosplay LARPing of World War II and this fetishization of little children. It was very, very disturbing. So I'd be really interested to see the work that the PhD students are doing at KMA. It's going to really change the nature of discourse between the West and what's going to be left of the ersatz Russian Federation.
Right. And
Ersatz
that
Russian Federation, indeed. So,
and of course the that television was aimed at the domestic DNR, so-called LNR market. And I remember this is just a quick story as an aside, in 2015, working on a documentary for Canadian television about the war, and I insisted that it's to call it a Russian invasion, and even the reporting that Canadian television was doing about MH17 and calling them pro-Russian separatists. And you would point out things like you can't take a bunch of guys from the mines or tractor drivers and give them a book, and just like that they will be shooting it around. And that partly that illusion that these were separatists or some kind of local initiatives and not inspired by Moscow. That recognition only came after 24-22, when Western journalists, and in fact a manager of mine, finally acknowledged and saying, "You were right. It was an invasion in 2015." And I guess that's for the "I told you so." I told you so file.
Segment.
But are we done with Zelenskiy's speech? Or are we moving on to?
No, I'd like to hear your take on it. I'd like to hear your take.
Well,
on it.
I mean, there's not a lot to add to except that the Zelensky seems doing a preemptive strike against this compromise. You can't compromise freedom, so he's already telling them, and it was actually reminded me of something Garry Kasparov, the Russian exiled former chess master. He makes a point of saying, there's warmongers, but now you're going to be seeing the peacemongers, right? Not the peacemakers, but the people that are going to be saying peace, peace, peace. So it's already, it's important to keep that in mind, that there's going to be peace at all costs. Why can't you just get along? Just stop fighting, put down the guns. So I think it's important that Ukraine is obviously very well communicating that. And then, again, this could be for another show, but just the other countries that he mentioned, like that line about we do not have the sling from Israel, right? The Israeli foreign minister was just in Kyiv for the first time. And I guess Ukraine is still counting on that kind of support. He mentioned Moldova, Iran, in different contexts, obviously, and to the point I think that Maxim was making, and in a way to address the Orban issue, bringing Scholz, Macron, Draghi to Kyiv, taking them to Bucha, taking them to Irpin in June, letting them see the war crimes face to face certainly had an effect, and maybe that's something that has to happen with like an Orban. Like, how can, if Orban, you come to Kyiv, we're gonna show you a little bit of something, and then see how his rhetoric might change about that. I think that that would be a good diplomacy. A little proactive if he remains in power.
Just like Orban and many others, they sort of developed some kind of a selective deafness to even to practical morality. Of which Maxim was talking. It's like the propaganda machine of Russia being a monstrous, a devastating, absolutely a demonic sort of a provocateur, accuses West of being market-oriented and using the concept of practical morality towards their own action, which is not just cynical. It's like it's this landslide between the continents, and it's something really insane. And again, I'm really grateful that we had Max today, because that was an important notion.
I'll say this: I'm happy that there is now a term for the peacemongers versus the peacemakers, because I was in a curious discussion on Twitter about that, and there's plenty of people who are against the war but support Ukraine in the West, and that doesn't necessarily make them part of Putin's Ruski Mir at all. So now you have an ad hominem by which you can go by. Regarding the peacemongers, they're going to come out in full force next week. I know there's going to be a big event in London at the Ethical Society, unfortunately, hosted by Mr. Galloway, who's used to work for, I don't know if they're still available, but he still does his own show. He's on Twitter tagged as a Russian media representative of a Russian media organization. So they're doing a big anti-NATO, this peacemongering approach to trying to draw attention to themselves. Interestingly enough, they were supposed to have their venue scheduled at one place, St. Pancras, I think it was. I'm probably mispronouncing the name of the church, but when they found out what the topic of their event was, they returned their deposit and said, no, don't do this here. And so they ultimately ended up going to the Ethical Society place in London, where they're supposed to have ethical debates, but apparently it's now filled with unethical types.
By the way, I just remembered one thing, Marco, and I just want to say that because I want to thank you and your spouse Uliana for this cup. The F word Putin, and with this beautiful Ukrainian thing on top of one of the letters. It's again for practical and for a placing of the ads. What I actually did is that I said hello from you and your wife, which is remembered at NATO headquarters, who is remembered at NATO headquarters. I gave it to Stoltenberg's Secretary General's press secretary, Oana Lungescu, with hello from Suprun's family, from Marek and Uliana. She was very happy, she was laughing, and the cup was beautiful. And I basically, thank you for that gift. It's in the right hands right now. And this is also an opportunity, a chance for me to say once again, and I have to do it a few times during this broadcast because we survive on ads and on donations, and that's important to us. So we got this wonderful lava-based guide in Iceland. That gentleman, being a certified tourist guide who speaks English and Ukrainian, is doing trips to Iceland, to the Northern Lights, and to the land of black sand beaches and lava, and all this exotic environment that you can only see in the Northern Europe. So we got those contacts in the description to this video, in the bio of this video, and if you feel like, you know, having a day off or two from the world politics, and we still can afford that at the brink of a potential escalation on our front line, because one of the things that we got to do is to learn to live in times of war, and basically this is what we're doing. And I had a chance to ask a question to Jens Stoltenberg. It was on the open conference. It was at the public event. We didn't do exclusive with him this time, although I met him a few years ago in person. And I'm going to tell you that I saw a very different Jens Stoltenberg that I've ever seen. He was absolutely robust, pushy for Ukrainian help. He was emotional to the extent you rarely see a northern Westerner, a northern European. And he was absolutely, again, emotional about what is happening and how speed and urgency are important. He repeated 3 times at his opening remarks at the defense minister session that speed saves lives and urgency is the name of the game. And I promised to our viewers that we not only discuss Zelensky today, but we discuss. I asked our producers to give a title to this broadcast, which is Zelensky is shaking Munich while NATO is shaking Reznikov, and there is something to it that I wanted to take a brief look at. And for the starter, I'd ask our broadcast director to put this couple of minutes of Stoltenberg answer to the question of Ukrainian media network and Kyiv Post. I've asked him about the way Ukraine could join NATO potentially, and whether he is considering any sort of old-fashioned membership action plan that was that could have been on the table for Ukraine after the before the Bucharest summit that was discussed more than a decade ago, and any other way of this gradual integration. And my second question to Jens Stoltenberg was about due diligence of Western assets, because this was one of the issues on the table, and Oleksii Reznikov, Defense Minister of Ukraine, did a report on the usage and the audit, the due diligence of Western assets, and he was listened to very carefully. And this is where we'll spend a couple of minutes discussing that. But let's listen to Jens Stoltenberg and his remarks answering our question a few days ago.
Russia protested heavily, but the allies and these individual countries decided their own path and invited them, and they are now members. Then Finland and Sweden are very close to membership. They are now invited to the alliance. They participate in NATO structures, meetings. They're at the NATO table. They are more and more integrated into NATO's civilian and military structures, including defense planning. So we are very close to also have 2 more, Finland and Sweden, as full-fledged members. On Ukraine, NATO's position has not changed. We have reiterated many times that Ukraine will become a member of the alliance, but the focus now is to ensure that Ukraine wins the war, because the only way to integrate and to ensure that Ukraine can move towards Euro-Atlantic cooperation, closer Euro-Atlantic cooperation, is to ensure that Ukraine prevails as a sovereign, independent nation. So the main focus of NATO allies is to ensure that Ukraine gets the weapons, the supplies, the ammunition they need to push back the Russian invaders. And we're also working on a more long-term partnership, helping Ukraine to to move from the Soviet era weapons, doctrines, standards to NATO standards, to improve interoperability on security and defense reform, and all that will move Ukraine closer to the NATO alliance. Then, of course, the best proof that the support works and is actually helping Ukraine is the progress Ukraine has delivered on the battlefield. And allies are also, of course, constantly working with the Ukrainian authorities to ensure that all the money, all the funding ends up where it should.
Due diligence.
But that's also, we have very close contact with them. We work on that all the time to ensure that we have the necessary oversight and transparency.
Due diligence of the assets.
And that's the way we are ensuring that that's happening.
Okay, thank you.
Natalia Duziak from Bloomberg. I wanted to ask about the defense spending.
Yeah, basically, I was trying to press him to get some more information, but the absence of I would say, negative comments was important too, because this is something that is happening, behind the scene. It is happening, and there is an issue of trust still, but I gotta say that despite the corruption scandals in Ukrainian Defense Ministry, from what I heard from the top diplomats in NATO, when it comes to this current situation with Minister Reznikov, it's like this bureaucracy in this gray form, so to say, is not an issue at this stage and is off the table. It is something that is really not considered as a trigger, to put Ukraine in a gray zone again. So this is not something that the local authorities, the Brussels and the NATO authorities are really pressing on. However, this transparency of shipments of weapons and munitions, of course, are discussed, and this is something that Ukrainian ministry really had to be ready for, and Ukrainian leadership has to be super accurate with that. And I recorded not that I've recorded, I had a conversation with one of the senior diplomats there when he, on the condition of not revealing his identity, but one of those who was present at all of these meetings, when we were talking about Reznikov's potatoes and eggs, this local corruption scandal, he said that case is closed for us. We understand that there is an anti-corruption push. This is something that we understand and respect, but this case is closed for us. This is what I've heard from a top official there. But of course, when we are talking about the munitions and weaponry, Western-produced munitions and weaponry, and trust Reznikov. So the comment was like this: Reznikov is extremely popular here. Everybody knows him, and here we are dealing with an extremely sensitive subject. So we got to understand what is happening. If there is any doubt, it would be already known here. If any shadow of the doubt would be here, it would already be here. But that that was the answer. So it was diplomatic and yet very strong. Reznikov is on the table for NATO. He is still a person that is an important player, and there is no crisis of mistrust, but there is a lot of course, there are a lot of questions, and there's a lot of attention towards everything that's we are under a very, very strong surveillance and and attention. And this is not something that we should take for granted. And the munitions and logistics and weaponry, and indeed, there is something that we're going to be well aware of. West is not turning a blind eye on things that really matters, and weapons and munitions matter. I cannot hear Stefko.
Sorry, I was muted there.
Oh, yeah, I got you back.
You got me now? So the keeping Reznikov was a very strong sign, but it kind of makes sense if, in the wake of that eggs, so-called scandal, and that somehow was reminiscent of something called Svinarchuk in 2019, and but this time around, the conditions are obviously different, and the Reznikov staying in power was a good sign, but he wasn't the problem. And the Washington Post, in the aftermath of that big scandal about corruption in Ukraine, they said no, there is no stealing of Western aid happening in the Ukrainian military. They did their own research, and of course that doesn't get reported. The fact that one guy in the president's admin used a car that was supposed to be used for evacuation. Like, these micro examples of corruption were certainly there, but there was nothing to indicate that it's systemic or that it's costing Ukraine anything in terms of victories at the battlefront. And in fact, today at the Munich, during the David on the Dnipro panel, the president, or the chairman of the Munich conference, Ambassador Christoph Heusgen, asked Zelensky 3 questions, and the third question he asked him about, what are you doing about the endemic corruption? And Zelensky said, well, you know what, corruption's not endemic, which was a very good answer. And it's in some ways ironic to be hearing a representative of the country of Gerhard Schroeder talking about endemic corruption when you kind of think that if anybody set the gold standard of how to be corrupted by Russia, it is actually the Germans, and and symbolized by none other than Gerhard Schroeder. So, but
Yeah.
Oleksii, you are right. This corruption mantra is going to keep going and keep going and keep going. And part of it, I think, is that there's in Ukrainian civil society, people that were charged with fighting corruption have done and are doing a pretty good job, but so good, in fact, that they're losing sight of the bigger issue and just feeding into this corruption. But kudos to Zelensky to putting diplomatically the ambassador of or the chairman of the Munich conference in his place, and saying that, you want to talk, corruption is not endemic. And then I'm, of course, editorializing myself, and it's my own thought that, it's ironic to be hearing about corruption from Germans who, thinking back to my time in Ukraine in the 90s, being laughed at, as a Canadian by some Germans for not playing the money in the paper bag game, that the Germans were certainly very good at, but us, principled, naive Canadians, wouldn't play that game. But, it's kind of as the English saying, it's the pot calling the kettle black.
Right. Zelensky also followed that up with a comment about having a very robust anti-corruption, anti-corruption. I forgot the second word he used, but anti-corruption environment or anti-corruption atmosphere that really is almost. I think maybe that there may be, again, I'm reading into it, but he's basically intimating very strongly that anyone who would even think about some massive form of corruption in which would have results, negative results on the front, that's almost undoable in today's Ukraine with the strong anti-corruption initiatives that are out there already. So that was also a nice answer to that question. And yeah, I mean, it's, you know, you spend 20 years connected to a Russian gas and oil pipeline, you're going to be addicted after a while. I mean, you know, the movement toward green energy has been going on for how many years in Germany, and the Greens are probably one of the biggest supporters of Ukraine, and they've been bringing that issue up in Germany for a very long time. So, you know, and essentially, this is that issue I often talk about, where morality and strategy have somehow been divorced from any kind of thinking vis-a-vis your foreign relations, your foreign policy, right? I mean, it's not okay to be to call yourself environmentalist and then build your economy to be completely dependent on Russian oil and gas. I mean, you're just passing that buck down the road. You're just as responsible for the one of the largest carbon footprints that we have today. But I also been editorializing. Oleksii, you're going to say something.
Just, you know, this time, again, you know, when you're sick of corruption, look at Iceland, because Iceland, according to Transparency International, is number 40 in, you know, on the list of the world countries to be, you know, transparent and in terms of, you know, public funds relocation and stuff. It scores 74 out of 100, which is a pretty good thing. But also, again, this is Iceland, and we got a guide there. We got an English language and Ukrainian language a guide to lead you through those black sand beaches and lava and the plateaus in the midst of the northern lights and all this absolutely beautiful celestial fire show happening there. So this is Iceland, and I just want to ask our producer to give those details on the screen, so it's for the record that we are doing our job, not only broadcasting but also placing ads. Vlad, do you hear me? We're talking about Iceland, the favorite topic of your spouse, Alina. Thank you. Yeah, and we got the same information in a bio. Now, basically, we're running out of time on one hand. On the other hand, if we still have like 15-20 minutes, I wanted to show you this, the conversation we recorded with Estonian defense minister, and I think it would also give us some insights on what was actually happening on the backstage of NATO gathering this week. And maybe we spent like 2-3 minutes afterwards. It's 15 minutes, and we spent 2-3 minutes afterwards finalizing, like rounding up this week, which was an incredibly proactive and filled with information and drive. Would you be okay with that, gentlemen?
Yes.
Good. So now the Estonian, and it's 15 minutes, and but I was really happy to meet Hanno Pevkur, the defense minister of Estonia, at the NATO's media facility, NATO's media studio. 3 days ago, we had a very intense and at times tough, but I think a very important conversation. So I would ask our studio to air the interview with Hanno Pevkur, Estonian Minister of Defense.
Ladies and
Are you ready for the World War III?
Well, I believe that there is no necessity for that. I believe that Ukraine can win this war without entering to the World War III.
Well, in a hybrid form, in an economic form, in a form of alliances that are built on both sides, it's basically looks like 1937 at least. So it looks like we're at the brink of a wider conflict. And your intelligence, Estonian intelligence, suggested that for the midterm perspective, you are at risk. It was this surveillance intelligence report that was published like 2 weeks ago, based on the research from 2022. But how do you feel right now when Russians already started, pushing forward on Ukrainian Eastern Front? Have you changed your perspective, your vision of how close we are to this, rising alerts for Estonia, for the Baltic states?
Well, for us, basically nothing has changed for the many years back when we go, because when you take that we had this hybrid cyber attack in 2007 from Russian side towards Estonia, then we already then saw that there is a huge potential that Russia might poke also or test NATO countries. So Russia went into Georgia in 2008, to Crimea in 2014. So basically we see that the Ukraine war has lasted already for 8 years, even more. And now we're entering to the first anniversary of the escalation of the war since 24th of February. So we know that the biggest threat has always been and will be Russia. We have tried to explain that to our Western allies for many, many years. And now we see that many of them have said that, yes, we should have listened to Estonia and other Baltic states before and earlier. So this is why I believe that also the Madrid summit statement that Russia is the biggest threat for the alliance is very right. And we see also the new steps what NATO is making to protect the alliance. But at this very moment, of course, we all have to help Ukraine to win this war, because as was stated also here in NATO headquarters many times today, that Ukraine is not only fighting for its freedom and for its people freedom, but Ukraine is fighting for the rule-based world.
Kaja Kallas did this groundbreaking statement almost a year ago, revealing the, I would say, the potential weakness of the strategy for defending Baltic states, and saying that we cannot wait this 180 days when the help would arrive, because we will face another Bucha, another, genocide, another massacre of Russians. Have the NATO changed its pattern, its strategy, its principles on defending Estonia and the Baltic states after Kaja Kallas' statement and going viral, going public about it?
Yes, a lot has changed. So not only helping Ukraine, because many months back there was discussion about the tanks, but many were speculating that it's too early or we cannot send or something. Now we see that tanks are rolling to Ukraine. And it's the same also with the eastern flank of NATO. So yes, there will be new regional plan, not only for Estonia, but regional plans coming out from the Sakhar's office in April. And we really believe and hope that in Vilnius summit we can approve also on the political level these new regional plans. And these new regional plans will take into account all the new threats and will be based on the threat assessment which was made quite lately, and also taking into account all what is happening at the moment in Ukraine.
You will not reveal any details of this plan so far before they're approved, or you could give us a couple of hints how NATO would step in reinforcing Baltic defense.
We see some of the steps already now, and after Madrid there was a clear shift to forward defense, and we see that Estonia has made a new roadmap for this year with together with the UK. We see new troops from US in Estonia. We have the HIMARS unit. We have the new battalion coming to Estonia. Half of it is already in Estonia. So we see that the footprint of NATO is much more stronger today already. And obviously, when the regional plans are coming out, this will also continue in the same way that yes, the footprint of NATO will be stronger in eastern flank of NATO. And as I always said, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, the eastern flank of NATO is like the front door of NATO. When you close it, then it's quite comfortable to be inside of the house. But when the front door is not locked, then it's a bit difficult to live inside.
A bit chilly, huh?
A bit chilly, or also, you are open to the people who are not awaited.
Estonia is doing this absolutely marvelous, fantastic job of supporting Ukraine, being a leader per capita for, sending whatever help is, whatever resources are available and needed to Ukraine. Do you plan to send any troops to Ukrainian frontline?
Well, we all know that this is not something we can discuss at the moment, and if at all, because Ukrainian people and Ukrainian army is strong enough to fight itself. What they need and what you need is the equipment, the training, and of course all that kind of help what your army is asking from the European allies, from the world allies. And this is something we are focusing at the moment. Also, we are giving in Estonia the training to Ukrainian soldiers. And this is the best help we can give to Ukraine at this very moment. And what I said also here today is that we can do all more. Even when we double the efforts, what has been done by so far, then we could only go up to 100 billions. When we take the same share what Estonia has done helping Ukraine, then this amount could be 500 billions. And when we take the same GDP per capita. So there is a huge potential also for the Western countries still to put more help to Ukraine.
This Ramstein meeting, what was really new there? What was the groundbreaking news, if there were any, during these hours when you spent with your partners and with the Ukrainians as well?
Well, we had more contributions 3 weeks ago, and now we have to deliver these contributions what we made 3 weeks ago. Also, Estonia announced our biggest shipment so far. Altogether 34 howitzers, if I remember correctly, and some ammunition, etc. So this is exactly what we now to do. What we have to do now. We have to deliver all these pledges we made 3 weeks ago, and still continue to find the ways how to help with the most critical needs. One of them is air support, air defense.
Is there a chance of accord with the NATO right now, today, tomorrow, to get the jets, to get F-16s?
It was not on the table today. So let's see how the things are developing. One thing what we see is that when we are giving, and what was said many times today, and what is of course very obvious, that when we give something, that we are not giving only the assets or equipment, but we need to give capabilities, which means that when you send, let's say, a tank, then you need also to provide training, maintenance, spare parts, etc. So which you cannot take just one tank from the stock and send to Ukraine. It will not help Ukrainians. So which means that it has to be a full chain of equipment what will come together with this decision to send some new assets.
I totally roger that. But when you say today, you mean today and tomorrow. So this Ramstein, this defense minister session would not bring F-16s, am I correct?
It's difficult to state that on the final stage, but I believe that at this very moment we are more concentrating on that how we can increase the number of trained people or the trainings, how we can increase and speed up the training of the tank personnel, how we can speed up these deliveries would have been done already by the governments. So yes, Estonia has sent the howitzers, and in the coming weeks we are sending the extra howitzers. But now it's very important also that these pledges, which what have been made, that these pledges will also be implemented, that they will end up in Ukraine as soon as possible, that we are not wasting the time. And this is why, at the moment it's more critical for Ukrainian forces to get this help which has been decided already.
On air defense, I mean, definitely we'd need more Patriots and more air defense, taking into account the Russians are still trying to use this scorched earth strategy towards infrastructure, power grid, everything. Were there any solid, big shipments discussed these days to really boost Ukrainian air defense?
Well, there are many air defense capabilities which are still not sent to Ukraine. So this is why we, as I said, this is why we need to speed up. There are different ones, Hawks and some others, which have to be still delivered. So this is why, all the countries who have said that they will send air defense also have to deliver this. And of course, we are looking for the extra options that can we like homologize or do something that you have, let's say, the books or some other air defense systems, and we can use maybe some assets, Western-made assets, to use also additionally this equipment what you have at the moment.
I know that you're skeptical about sanctions that could stop Russian military production or break it back. But at least you said that a few months ago. But when we look at Russia's production now, and when Ukrainians look at that, it seems like there may be loopholes, for instance, with titanium and with the other stuff that is needed for them to boost their military production. Are you looking at the other options to stop shipments of these kind of goods that could be used for military production? For instance, titanium, Russians are buying it from China, but not only from China. So can we look into this issue a little bit and give some more details?
All these loopholes have to be closed, for sure. And all the countries have to look very closely what kind of goods are going through their own countries and to where. And definitely these sanctions, what are in place, they have to be also executable. Which means that every new sanction we put in place, it has to be also effective. And I really hope that also on the European level and together globally we can find the new ways how to affect Russian economy in order to reduce their possibility to feed Russian army with what they need.
Well, these things discussed during these sessions, these meetings here these days in Brussels.
I said that, yes. I said that clearly that that we have to put new sanctions and new offensive spring, if I may say so, also on the sanction level, because this is very important. And we see already the decrease of the Russian economy. We see that they are eating already their own reserves. This is all what we see from the Russian economy. But nevertheless, we all know, especially Estonia and Ukraine, we all know that even when Russia go to minus with their economy, and then it doesn't bother Kremlin or Putin to make these military decisions.
NATO is still reluctant, to say the least, to even mention the possibilities of Ukrainian membership. Is it moving anywhere? Is there, because with the guarantees, without the membership, Ukraine would never feel really accepted to the club, being basically the spearhead of that club already. But is this discussion moving anywhere now in NATO ahead of the Vilnius summit?
My advice is very simple. Let's try to win this war first, because this is the most important task for all of us at the moment. And as was mentioned here today many times, that Ukraine is fighting for all of us, and Ukraine is fighting for the rule-based world. So this is the goal number one. When we achieve this, then we can take the next steps. Because when you're focusing too many things, you cannot be successful in all these efforts. So which means that let's focus at the moment to winning this war.
Thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll meet again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We had this talk, and I was focused on jets at the time, and there were not, I would say, not mixed signals, but there was silence from Lloyd Austin, from Stoltenberg, no, direct comments. And Estonian defense minister was the first to say it bluntly that, these are not on the table at this stage. So, overall, what's your impression of NATO's news coming from NATO this week, I would say? And I would ask Marko and Stefko to comment on this, and then we'll round up slowly, because basically the time is running out for us. But I just want to hear your comments on how do you feel about it? What's your perspective?
Stefko?
I cannot hear you, Stefko. I cannot hear your voice. Now there's no sound. There's no sound.
Well, I think that it was a good question. I mean, it was a good interview. The fact that the Estonians are probably the most intimately understand the nature of Russian aggression for us is not really new. Probably for a lot of Westerners, it would be an eye-opener, I would say. And I would go so far as to say it probably wasn't clear to Ukrainians either until around just after Revolution of Dignity, the extent to which Russia is undermining democracies in this part of the world and trying to reclaim its lost empire. There was a really great YouTube video. It was put up in November of 2021 called How to Start a Riot with Information Weapons. And it's a brilliant breakdown of the cyber attack that the Estonian Minister of Defense was referencing. And it's something that always goes very, very overlooked, that Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania have always been and will be in the crosshairs of Russian nationalism, chauvinism, and Nazism. They are not going to stop with Ukraine. And other than, I think most of the people present at Ramstein and at NATO understand that now. It's taken them a while to internalize that understanding. And I think that's why we're seeing an uptick in weapons deliveries like tanks. And I would go so far as to say that if the United States, say the Congress, where the Democrats and the Republicans can do show the bipartisan coalition, that the administration would most likely change their mind about sending F-16s. That's one of the last remaining, I would say, tactical issues that's facing the coalition of victory, which is to provide Ukraine with the necessary instruments to close the sky over Ukraine. And once that happens, and if that happens within the next, say, 3 months, I think we're going to see a rapid decline in the unity and the cohesiveness of the Kremlin and and Putin's cronies around him. Stefko?
Well, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I don't really have much insight to add to that, except, just recall that from the Ukrainian perspective, this Rammstein was called the Air Rammstein, and now I guess it's clear that that was kind of the Ukrainian wish that it would be the Air Rammstein. But F-16s for Ukraine's side, you're seeing a lot of F-35s action in Europe now, and I know Canada has just signed or committed to getting some F-35s as well, a project that was 10 years ago put on the back burner if memory serves. So, I mean, there's a fog of war element too, and I mean, we've been saying close the skies since day one, and that still is not on the table because of this, hypothetical that somebody's might shoot down the NATO member airplane, and that automatically triggers Article 5 and mutually assured destruction and blah blah blah. Well, I mean, in the end, one can only hope that this war or the peace or the world order that emerges after it, that mutually assured destruction will be itself destroyed. That doctrine and that, of course, entails the denuclearization or the taking away the nuclear weapons of Russia, which once again you don't hear any of the so-called Russians opposition that I follow anyway, calling for getting Russia to get rid of its nuclear weapons, and you don't also hear the disarmament that will likely be the peacemongers that we talked about later, calling for Russia to give up its nukes. It's only America that has to give up its nukes, but Russia gets to keep its nukes. And on that note, in terms of the peacemongers, I think that given the rumblings about Putin's upcoming speech this week on the 21st, if memory serves, or the 22nd,
Correct. There's actually two speeches.
And the peacemongers will be activated. The Kremlin shield peacemongers will be activated shortly thereafter.
Thank you, gentlemen. We had this lengthy and very thorough conversation today, and we got Marek Suprun and Stefan Bandera. My name is Oleksii Bobrovnykov. We also got Jens Stoltenberg, Secretary General of NATO, and we got Hanno Pevkur, the Estonian Defense Minister, on air tonight for our Ukrainian media network, a Friday's late night podcast, or early morning, or a noontime podcast for those who listen and watch us from North America. We are the Ukrainian media network, a broadcast that has nothing to do with the local oligarchs or state funding. We are the independent media. We have a very ambitious plan of becoming the first effective and a solid Ukrainian media that has no oligarchic or any other sort of toxic influence upon us. And we succeed. Last month in January, Ukrainian media network, which is predominantly producing content in Ukrainian, has gathered 500,000 hryvnias of donations, which is a good news. But also, we're placing ads, and we're surviving as a normal, I would say, market-based, market-oriented outlet. So I have to state once again that we got a wonderful partner in Iceland, the land of black sand beaches, lava, and northern lights, that are on display for those who can dial this number to get the Ukrainian and English language guide there. And the description of that service, of that beautiful opportunity, is in the description of this broadcast. At this stage, I just gotta say thank you for all of us for tolerating lengthy pieces of speeches. Even Max Yakovlyev, who's one of those absolutely fantastic experts that we have, had to be patient to listen to the full version of Zelenskiy's speech. And I'm grateful you did it, Stefko, because that was really inspiring, and for me it was also very intimate. Strange enough, but Zelensky found the way to use those two words, a sling and a name of David, which for me personally recalls a very intimate and a very important memory of this war. Thank you, gentlemen, and hopefully we see each other next Friday. And,
Absolutely.
UMN is getting ready for another broadcast, so we're off air tonight, and see you soon.
See you soon.
Thank you.